Fascinating relegation battle in League Two with just 5 points separating the bottom 9. 6 of those clubs, of course, we'll be discussing this evening on EFL Debate, so plenty to get stuck into.
Disappeared. I'm sure Gabe will be back in a minute. Just me and you will just talk about Cardiff all the way through. That's fine, not a problem. I'm used to doing that. I'm sure Gabe will be back in just a second. Technical. The joys of relying on the internet. I'll send him a message quickly. I'm sure he knows anyway. Cardiff definitely not going down though. I'll tell you that much. Oh, you're back.
Hello, can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Okay, that's a relief. So I wanted to talk to you about Cardiff City. I've seen one or two people questioning maybe the fitness levels based on recent performances with Cardiff City. So just wondering what your take is on that, really.
Yeah, I think it's probably a fair-ish criticism. I think part of the issue was that when Omar Risa came in initially, he played the same 11, I think, for 4 games in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the kind of issues that I think Cardiff are seeing with Omar Risa is that he's learning on the job. And I think what he learned in that first 4 or 5 games is that you can't play the same 11 when you're playing 3 times a week.
Right.
And we did struggle. I think it was the West Brom game where that was like the 3rd game in a week. And I had said in my preview, just don't play the same 11 because I think we'll struggle. And we really never got going against them. He varied it up last against Coventry and sort of rotated it a little bit more, but he's learning on the job. And but I do think there's probably a bit of a fitness issue as a general sort of rule of thumb in there at the moment.
Yeah, do you think that there's a coaching, sports science side of things at play where, as well as the consistent same 11 and the fatigue that might cause, do you think that that's an area that Cardiff City as a football club have got to look at?
Well, what I can tell you, mate, is we are on a threadbare coaching staff at the moment. So at the moment, you have Omar Risa as the manager till the summer. You have Darren Pearce, who is technically the under-23s manager, but is acting as essentially the assistant manager to Omar Risa. You have the goalkeeper coach, Gavin Ward, who's been brought in as like an interim goalkeeper coach. And you have Tom Ramasolt, who's been there for years. And that's it. That's all the coaches for the first team. I'm not sure about the sports science. Obviously, there's a medical department, which I think have had a bit of criticism from fans because we always seem to pick up similar types of injuries, and they always seem to be, instead of, I don't know, like a month, 6 weeks, whatever, they always seem to be 3-4 months. And that's obviously an issue which we're seeing again now this year with the likes of Isaac Davis is out, probably won't be back till gone January. Aaron Ramsey the same. Atete, there's a few which haven't played this year or have played like one game. And there's two of those players that I just said are strikers, and something we are desperately in need of. So that's obviously a big issue.
Certainly is. You mentioned a skeletal staff there. I suppose there's also limited options in terms of the squad. You mentioned some of those injuries there. I'm wondering, are there any options available to Omar Ritza to try and sort of freshen things up?
Yeah, there's options there. Gabe, I think I've said this to you before. One of my frustrating things with Cardiff on the whole over the last few years is, particularly this season now, we have, for lack of a better term, a kind of golden generation of academy players coming through at the moment in the 18s, the 23s, and then there's a couple out on loan. And the club seems quite reluctant to give them first team football until they kind of get to the point where they're like absolutely sort of under, you can't not play them sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so often over the years, we've seen players slip through the net, either because they've left before they get first team opportunities, or they leave at a much younger age. The likes of Gareth Bale lives around the corner from me, or did when he was younger, and ends up at Southampton's academy and not Cardiff's academy. Then there's a whole list of, Craig Bellamy and people like this over the years. And I think the frustrating thing for Cardiff fans at the moment is there's a whole host of young players who could contribute to this squad now. You've got Joel Colwell on loan, who's doing very, very well at Cheltenham. Raheem Conte was one who played first team football towards the end of last season, is very versatile positionally, and we sent him out on loan. I think he's gone to Woking. I'm not sure if I think he's played, he's played a bit, but my I guess the argument that Cardiff fans have is that you never quite know if they're going to make it or if they're going to be good enough if you don't give them opportunities. And when you look at some of the teams at the top of the championship, like Sunderland, they are playing their sort of 21-year-olds in the first team. They wanted to sign the striker Simic in the summer, which we actually beat them to. They wanted to sign him for their first team squad to play this season. Cardiff sent him out on loan to one of our sister club, and now we haven't got a striker who's outside of Callum Robinson. We don't have a striker who can do anything, and it's just like those puzzling decisions with the young players, I think, which is getting frustrating. But I will add that I think Omar Ritza, now that he's got a little bit of security, may utilize those young players a bit now, because he's not almost playing for his job week to week, if that makes sense. Right, yeah. Like he's got a little bit of security till the summer, so we'll see, I guess.
That's good. I think you always want to incentivize managers. If you've not got the most resources in a league, you want to incentivize managers to give young players a chance so that they can become those big assets that you can then sell on. So that's great. I suppose I'm looking at your more experienced players, because you're also going to have to lean on them in a relegation dogfight. How important do you see the likes of, I suppose, Perry and G's played English football a lot for the last 8 years now. You've got Dimitrios Gutas, who's a real battler. You've got Siopis as well. Alex Robertson as well, scored 1 or 2 lovely goals lately. How important do you think those players are going to be coming into the Christmas period?
So the easiest one straight away is Alex Robertson. I've said recently on my channel that Cardiff fans should just enjoy him while he's here, because he's 21 and he's not going to be with us for long, I don't think. I think we'd be lucky if we get 2 seasons out of him before he's snapped up by someone, which, is part and parcel of being in the championship, I suppose. But he's an exceptional young player, and ever since Omar Rees came in and made sure that he's playing week in, week out, you've sort of seen that he's been a big part of the good things that Cardiff have done in recent weeks or under Omar Rees. I think Gutas has been very big for us since Rees took over, particularly because Callum Chambers was having a bit of a rocky start to his Cardiff career. Jesper Darlin got injured. Will Fish hasn't quite had his opportunity yet. So it was kind of like we were struggling a little bit at the centre-back positions, and Gutas came in, and not only did he look back to his best, but he also settled down Callum Chambers a little bit. So I think in fairness to those two, they've kept the others out in terms of the centre-backs, and I don't think the issues defensively that we've had have come in the centre-back areas. In fact, we've hemorrhaged goals actually this season from the right-back area, which is probably a problem, and I don't necessarily think it's solely down to Perry NG. I think part of the problem is that Perry NG is the only recognised right back at the club, and going back to that reluctance to play the younger players, we got some real good young fullbacks, but because Perry NG knows he's playing week in, week out, I do wonder whether there's subconsciously a bit of lack of concentration and things like that. And it's not just him, by the way. Ruben Colwell got dropped to the bench against Coventry, and he's largely been our best creative player. But the last sort of couple of games before that, it felt like he was, again, because he knew he was going to play. He was going to play every minute. He was starting. He almost needed a bit of a reminder that, you can drop to the bench and not play. And I think you could see when he came on then that there was a big change in his body language, his effort levels and things like that. So, yeah, you need those experienced players, mate, at the end of the day. I don't think we'll be in a relegation battle come the end of the season.
What would be your case for that then, Si? What gives you that sort of confidence that you're going to? Because that's a big statement, like 5 points between the bottom 9, and you're saying you're not going to be in a relegation battle.
Look, I understand like the way the championship is. We could be. I just believe that the squad is good enough, and in particular the playing squad largely wanted Omar Rees to stay. So for me, they've been very vocal in backing him. So they now need to. They've done their talking off the pitch, if you like, in terms of supporting him. Now they've got to show it in performances. My only concern is that at the moment, it doesn't look like we're going to bring in any coaches to help him, which was what I thought we would do, is like give him the job till the summer, but maybe bring in either a very experienced coach or a tactically astute coach. Because he's obviously learning on the job.
If you're a young manager, having an experienced coach who really knows what they're doing, not to say at all that Omar Rees doesn't. I'm sure he's very talented, but that really experienced streetwise figure that knows the job and been around the block a few times, I think that can be invaluable. So I do wonder if the club are kind of underestimating the importance of that side of things.
100%. I think, and it's like I've said a few times, it doesn't necessarily have to be experienced. I think experience is probably the safer option, but I just think he needs someone who's very tactically astute and clever, so that while he's learning as he's going along, having someone who's tactically very aware is handy. Because a couple of times he has made changes to the tactics in game that have come off or have made sense, but he's also gone a bit early or a bit late in some of those changes where it hasn't come off. So the Bristol City game, for instance, we were leading, we were all over, and we looked like we could go on and score.
That was a great performance. I thought. I watched the extended highlights of that game. I thought he played really well for large parts of it.
But what he did is he went to 3 sort of stroke 5 at the back at about the hour mark, when at that point, before he made that change, we looked like we were going to go on and score 3 or 4. And then after that, the second he made that change, we just surrendered all the impetus in the game. And then it became more of a trying to just keep it as it was. They
Yeah,
equalise.
I always think bringing on an extra centre half to protect a lead is such a dangerous
Yeah,
game
of course,
because
yeah.
you could end up ceding the midfield territory and just inviting teams onto you. So hopefully there's lessons to be learnt for him. I can tell that he's a very talented coach. He's got seems to have a great reputation within coaching circles. You don't coach England youth if you're no good as a coach. So clearly he's got that pedigree. A few lessons to be learnt, but I think it's been a broadly positive start for him. So hopefully that can continue. Si, really appreciate your time and thanks for your input, and hope everyone goes and gets subscribed to Cardiff City World.
Indeed. Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Top man, Si. Delighted to be joined now by Jack Bryan from Rams Review. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Good evening. Just wondering about Derby County. I'm kind of in two minds at the moment. I don't know how you're feeling because on the one hand, I'm looking at Derby around lower mid-table, which is kind of what the best that we could have expected this season. I probably saw Derby being in that kind of bottom 8 this season. So I'm certainly not holding the results against you in what was always going to be a difficult opening campaign at this level. At the same time, there's part of me that feels like there's a conservatism about Derby County that fans aren't entirely happy with at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the results since the last time I was on here speaking to you, at that point, Derby had won 3 of their first 5. Things were going, quite frankly, better than expected. Since that 9 points for the first 5 games, they've got 11 in the following 14. 2 wins, 5 draws, and the rest of those games have been losses. Now, what I would say is if you look at the distance between them and the relegation zone, this is probably what we expected at the start of the season, what we're seeing now. However, there is no denying it's been a really poor run of late, and there is definitely frustration bubbling amongst the flock.
Certainly is. I mean, to what extent, Jack, do you have sympathy for Paul Warne in the sense that, going to somewhere like Elland Road is always going to be a hiding to nothing. Lots of good teams have gone to Elland Road and really struggled to lay a glove on them. At the same time, and you're without, players in midfield like David Ozo, for instance. At the same time, you want to feel like there's a strategy to try and get something. And I can think of other managers who are working with similarly low budgeted clubs that would go in with a mentality of let's try and disrupt them. Let's try and, get into their system. Let's try and, give ourselves a fighting chance of maybe trying to grab something. And I just feel like, was it a little bit defeatist the way Derby County went to Elland Road?
Well, it was as if Paul Ward had been watching the weather forecasts over the weekend. All these warnings to take caution when travelling. I mean, he took the party literally onto the pitch, didn't he? He's basically said that they were set up to not lose 5-0. There's been some really disappointing results given performances in the last few weeks. You think back to the Swansea game, they started really badly. Far too passive, concede 2 in 14 minutes. They then start to step up. They're much the better side for most of the rest of that game. They accumulate their highest XG figure since December 2020, yet can only score from the spot. There's games like that where, really, given the chances they're creating, they should be coming away with something. I think had they done that, the atmosphere and the feelings around games like Saturday at Elland Road would be, oh, well, we didn't expect anything, we didn't get anything, move on. I think because of the poor run of results of late, these spirals, I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, I wrote a piece on Saturday night and I said, is this either the harsh reality or was it a really negative mentality? Have Derby simply got to accept that they are not where they were 5 years ago? They can't go toe-to-toe with Leeds in the way that they did, say, under Frank Lampard on that famous night, the last time Derby fans went to Elland Road. Or, actually, are they just being too negative? And as you say, can they take the game to them? I think had they have had Ebo Adams and David Oza in the middle of the park, they would have set up slightly differently. There would have been that bit more steel. And things, I think the dynamics of the game would have been perfectly set up for them as kind of enforcers Adams with his crunching tackles. I mean, as of a couple of weeks ago, he made the most tackles of anyone in the Championship. David Ozo has that bit more class on the ball to bring it out of tight spaces. But with what they had, it was valiant defending for the first 35 minutes. They'd set up to frustrate Leeds. They did that. To be honest, once Leeds went 1-up and then got second 5 minutes later, you feared for them that the floodgates were going to open. And I think Paul Warren's mentality come full time was, thank goodness we didn't do that. That's a pat on the back.
Yeah.
So that's when you then get those sorts of comments post-match. I mean, on the one hand, people respect his honesty. I think the comment, I don't know if you've heard his interview with Radio Derby from Saturday afternoon, the comment that's really baffled people, and this has baffled me, I can't see really the reason for saying this publicly. He said that they're a Premier League squad, which is their comment.
Yeah.
But then he said that Derby are a League One squad with a sprinkling of sugar. Now, calling your own squad, your own players, quality of the league below, is going to go one of two ways. He has since clarified these comments today, so he's explained them to the players. He was just trying to highlight the gap between the two sides.
Yeah.
But that's certainly something that has raised eyebrows.
Yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I don't think he's entirely wrong on paper, but I think it's the mentality that you go into it with, that you want to try and believe in your players and you want to sort of go in feeling like you're in there fighting and you're trying to get something, and you can accept falling a little bit short, but you want to go in feeling like the team's given it everything to try and get something. And maybe it was a little bit passive. I suppose, in terms of the impact that David Ozo and Ebo Adams can have, Jack, I don't know if either you've got a timescale on their returns or, feeling on, can they give this team a bit more steel in that central area?
So Ebo Adams, it was unfortunate timing, really. He picked off his fifth yellow card against Sheffield Wednesday, so he should be back tomorrow night at Turf Moor. That will be a boost, of course, for Derby. He's been instrumental, really, ever since he came in at the end of January. David Ozo, he picked up that injury against Cardiff. He was nearly back from it, picked up another injury. There doesn't seem to be a timescale on that. I have seen people questioning whether perhaps he'll go back to Palace in January if Derby need to kind of have a midfield body now. That all depends on, I would imagine, the length of the injury. In the few games he played, he looked really good. He made a real impression on Derby fans and on Paul Ward, it seemed. But, it's one of those things at the end of the day. There's a squad spot being used up to no benefit at the moment. And if that's going to be the case for the majority of the season, then I imagine they'll rethink. I mean, I think that bit of defensive stability, that bit more steel in that midfield would really have helped somebody like Kane Wilson, who didn't have a very good game on Saturday.
Although I actually thought Kane Wilson, to be fair to him, he did have a moment in the first half where he carried the ball. I don't know if it might have been quite early on where he sort of carried the ball past one or two players and it looked like he might get somewhere.
To be honest, I'm not sure how much of that relatively poor game was his fault in terms of, one, why is he on Joe Rodon for the first goal? Yes, they're kind of marking in a specific way and they've set up to that. But why, when you've got somebody who has given you a warning shot heading just wide from a corner a few minutes earlier, and you've got probably your second smallest player on the big centre back who's already proven himself to be an aerial threat?
Yeah.
And two, he practically plays as a winger, doesn't he? Derby set up in a 5 there, and in possession, he would become a right winger pretty much. They'd stay in a 4. I wonder whether, I'm almost certain actually, if Ryan Nyambi had been fit, I think he'd have been playing at right wing back in a 5 in that situation, even though he's not natural there, just based on what Paul Ward's mentality was. Kane Wilson he's a wing back, but really, he's only a defender on paper, isn't he? He's
Would you know what I think though? I feel sometimes it's hard. For me, I actually think in games where you know you're going to be on the back foot, I actually prefer to have 2 out-and-out strikers than go with a 3, because even if a sort of front 3, if you like, quote unquote, looks more attacking on paper, what tends to happen is that, well, in your case, Caden Jackson and Nathaniel Mendes-Lang, they get forced back. So instead of it being a 3-4-3, it's basically a 5-4-1, and then poor Jerry Yates is on his own. Whereas I actually wonder, for that kind of game, I'd actually be more inclined to go with the front 2, so that you don't have that thing of the wide forwards tracking back, because actually what you really want is, if you're going to play with the front 3, you would need them pinned high up the pitch, so that, okay, they might sometimes needs must, but actually you've got the 5, you've got the 2 in midfield. What you want is to kind of occupy the opposition defence and give yourself an outlet, a bit of oxygen, because sometimes it can just become a bit overwhelming when you've got a team of the quality of Leeds and you've got no way out. You
100%.
need those outlets. Yeah.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that as well, because I have been saying for weeks, Jerry Yates' best football throughout his career, he's always looked most comfortable in a strike partnership, in a front 2. Derby were chasing a striker all summer. Paul Ward wanted one right up until the final hours of deadline day. Couldn't get it over the line. And I think that's because Jerry Yates' all-round play has been pretty solid when he's got on the ball.
I don't think he did anything wrong, by the way, Jack, at Elland Road. I just felt really sorry for him. I think he competed quite well.
100%. I think he regularly, I mean, Elland Road was an extreme example, but he'll regularly have the least touches of any outfield player to start the game. In that game, he played 80 minutes, had 12 touches. Junior Firpo went on up to 21 minutes and had 15. Now, as I say, that's slightly extreme, but it's not unusual for him to be at the bottom of that list of touches. I mean, he often does that, yet still creates the most chances of any Derby player, which tells you something. So I think they need him as a bit of a second striker, a bit of a creator, and a full-blown finisher next to him. You've then got Kane Wilson able to come up, as you say, alongside them at times, and things might look different. I mean, there's all this debate amongst Derby fans around Paul Ward's future. I'd say, do you spend that money, if you want to sack him, do you spend it on that? Or do you spend it on getting a decent striker in to play alongside Jerry Yates? Because if they can start finishing these chances that they've been created over the past few weeks, things maybe start to look different. I mean, it's really interesting, but I do think there's been a slight misprofiling there in Jerry Yates playing up front on his own at times. His best football, as I say, has come in the front 2, and that is something that they need to rectify. Is probably my second biggest moan in football right now, behind the Scotland women's manager still being in the job. But, that's for another day.
That's for another podcast. Jack, thanks so much for joining us, and keep up the great work on Rams Review.
Thank you. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Get yourself subscribed, everyone. Delighted to be joined now by Ollie Hargreaves of the Butter Pie podcast. Good evening, Ollie. How are you?
Good evening, Gab. Another nice background again for one of these. Camping.
Yeah, looks nice.
Yeah, nice, pretty and pink. Brings out my eyes. But I thought I'd throw on a nice retro shirt just to make sure that it counteracts the nice pink.
You've put your whites in with your colours, have you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's a bit of an abysmal. But yeah, I'm all good.
Yeah, it's a bit like what was it, Paddington 2, where he put the. Yeah. You ever seen that?
Where he puts
the kit in.
Yeah, and they all end up pink, don't they? The pink stripes of the prisoners. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit pink at the moment. Well, a bit blue, I should say.
A bit blue, yeah. Well, you got a decent point at Hillsborough, didn't you? Can't bemoan that. Can't begrudge that too much. I think that's a decent result. I think Sheffield Wednesday will turn over a lot of teams at home this season.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, you look at it and you think you probably would have taken it before the game. Going into the game and the way we started, first half, I thought we were right up for it, right on the front foot. I thought Masrokia, especially in the first 20 minutes, showed his worth. Brilliant pinpoint pass through to Kessler Hayden, which he didn't finish. And then obviously...
Ollie, do you ever feel sorry to interrupt you there? I want to hear the rest of how that game panned out. But do you ever feel like with Rokia Jensen, a bit sorry for him that he's not playing for a Middlesbrough or for a Leeds? Because I feel like he would stand out. Well, it's like, would it benefit him more if he was playing in this side with loads of really good attacking players around him?
Are you asking me if my favourite player should be? No, but I do get your point. Yeah, he's far too good for Pearney. And I feel like if he was to be playing for a team with high chance creation rate, if he's able to play in the middle 10, I think he'd probably be right up there with the best creative midfielders in the league. I mean, my opinion's biased. When he's on it, he already is in a P&E side.
Right.
If you obviously go to a side where you've got higher quality of players, better chance creation, better chance conversion, which is a big thing on North End's radar at the moment, his stats will look a lot better, and it'll look a lot better on data. But on the eye, he's a superb player. But yeah, he was the catalyst in the start of our lead at Hillsborough. And to be fair, we probably should have held on to it. We were the better side. But to be fair, I'm feeling a little bit more positive, actually.
Yeah. Can I ask, Ollie, actually, do you think, would you say that encouraging performance at Sheffield Wednesday, putting aside, the result, I'm sure you'd have wanted more than a point based on how you played, but do you think that encouraging performance was something that you would have seen coming based on previous performances, or do you think it can be a real starting point that gives Paul Heckingbottom something to build on?
I think so. I think in the past few weeks we've had a couple of performances that probably warrants more 3 points than getting a draw. Especially West Brom at home as well. I thought in the second half we were the better team. I felt like we could have gone on and scored another, and then obviously we come up against Sheffield Wednesday where for 60 minutes I think we're the better side. We give away the penalty, which Freddie Woodman does fantastically to save. And then obviously he has a bit of a howler, letting in Michael Smith's goal. For me, it's another 2 points dropped. But like, as you say, you look at it on paper and, not many teams are going to go over and, bowl over a Danny Roll side who has plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G in terms of...
You're going to go through the whole last bit there, Ollie.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this could be the start of something. But then again, you're coming up against a good Cardiff side at the moment on Wednesday away from home, and you look at that and you're thinking, if we can't get a decent result from there, we're still going to be slipping down the table, and then who knows? But yeah, I'm more optimistic that we'll turn these draws into wins rather than turning the draws into losses.
Let's hope that's the case. Who else other than Frokja Jensen would you say have been key to this recent sort of upturn in performance?
To be fair, I know I mentioned Ali McCann a lot. He's been superb all season long, especially in the centre of midfield. And recently, in the past 3 games, Stefan Ford-Arsen's come back into the... Big Steve. Yeah, obviously overtaken Whiteman, who's been... moved to the bench after he's, to be fair, he's had a very underwhelming season so far as Whiteman. But he's been brilliant, Stefan. He's come in, he looks on the front foot. He's able to find Frokja and Greenwood, and another person who's been doing very well for us this season. And, you just need a bit of quality for those two to be able to put the ball in behind for Emil Rees or, Kessler Hayden, etc. Which they did do, but the thing is, we should be scoring 3 or 4 goals per game with this, the play that we're able to do. It's just not coming off for us at the moment. Yeah, the midfield quartet's been superb. I felt the best. It's probably the best we've played in terms of the midfield all season. That first half with McCann, Ford-Arsen, Frokja and Greenwood kind of in like a box in the middle of the park, which on paper and watching is really good. It's just a shame about the lads behind him, and then obviously not getting the goals in front of them.
Yeah, well, hopefully that conversion can improve. You're pretty confident from the way you're talking. I imagine you're pretty confident that you're going to beat the drop.
At the moment, yeah. At the moment, but then again, it's like, is all I'm thinking of is we're Preston, we're always mid-table. You know, we're never near the drop. We don't usually get pulled into it. We're safe. That's kind of the main thing that's keeping me going at the moment, because you look around us and the performances are getting better. You know, Pompey smashed Bristol 3-0 at the weekend. QPR was superb against Norwich as well, and then there's us, you know, just picking up draw after draw after draw, not really picking up 3 points. If you had to ask me now, I think we'll be safe. It's just a massive January. If we're able to, you know, bring in, you know, maybe 1 or 2 loan players like we have done in previous years. I like, obviously, the Tom Cannon when he came in on loan, you know, scored 6 or 7 goals, just proper solidified us. And then, you know, we're obviously going to need some defensive recruits as well. But who knows come January time as well? You know, we've got quite a lot of players out of contract in summer. And usually, you know, as a last gasp, if they're not going to sign contracts, we sell them off, as we've seen with Pearson, we've seen with Davis, who obviously went off to Bournemouth and Liverpool respectively. Could potentially see that with an Emil Rees, who, you know, a Championship club would be lucky to pick up on.
And just finally from me then, Ollie, you mentioned that on the out-of-contract players. That obviously gives the manager in charge in the summer a real scope to sort of shape the squad in their image. You look at Paul Heckingbottom, and the fan base look at Paul Heckingbottom as a manager that you're really happy to build with, presuming, you know, he oversees whatever's required to stay up this season. Because I look at it, I think the structure of the club is the structure of the club. It's, you know, not perfect for where you're at right now. But what I think is a real advantage for Paul Heckingbottom is that he's worked at Sheffield United, where I think he had a title that meant he could oversee the whole football operation of the club and not just necessarily coaching the players. So he does have some experience, I guess, of overseeing the operation and not just the coaching side, which might favour him in this kind of that kind of club.
100%. I think if you asked 99% of P&A fans, Paul Heckingbottom's the man for the job. He's come out in interviews recently saying, you know, the best way to, you know, get resources and be able to build the infrastructure is through player trading. We need to get back doing. I think our latest accounts aren't showing too well. You know, £4.5 million spent on player incomings, 0.4 million on player sales, and then going back, you know, our best couple of sales.
Well, you've handled contracts horrendously for ages, haven't you?
Absolutely. You know, I've only told you a million times about Pearson and Davis, where in their primes, you're selling them for 10 million a pop, and we got about 1.52 million from both, which is crazy stuff. But we need to get back to that same type of model where, you know, we were buying Jordan Hugill for, you know, pennies. We're selling him on for 9.5 million to cheers David Moyes. And then we had Callum Robinson as well, who we brought from Aston Villa. You could even say Daniel Johnson. I know we didn't sell him on for much, but we bought him
for 50 grand, wasn't it? That was the best 50 grand you'll spend.
And then you get Alan Brown as well for 10 grand as well. So that's not really spoken about a lot. We need to get back to that. He's mentioned it, and he seems the type of manager to want to, you know, inbuild trust into players, you know, bring him through. We saw that with Iliman Ndiaye, especially. I thought he did very well under Heckingbottom at Sheffield United. He gave him probably more of a real chance and allowed him to develop, and now he went on to Marseille, etc. We just need to get the recruitment right, and it feels like P&A have gone very safe recently. I know we've, you know, scouted Scandinavia and, you know, realised there's other countries in the world other than the UK and Ireland. But
you've just realised that, have you?
They've just realised it. They've just, you know, got the add-on for Football Manager. Oh, Scandinavia, yeah, brilliant. But
they didn't think the equivalent of flat earthers were. There's nothing outside of Preston. It's like, or UK and Ireland. After that, it's like it just drops off.
UK and Ireland and everything else, it's just not happening. But Scandinavia, you know, Forderson seems to be a good buy, but he's 26. You know, I think I mentioned it on the last pod. He's got to hit the ground running, but then again, I don't think you can get much money for a 27, 28-year-old who's had 1 or 2 seasons in the Championship. You're probably going to be looking at, if he has a fantastic season or so, 4 or 5 million at best. You look at Jeppe Ockels as well, another Peter extravaganza of a £1.7 million winger who he bought when there was no manager involved, when Rilo walked. He bought him, he started 1 game this season, and we don't play with wingers, so that's brilliant. But he's 25 again. He's a 25-year-old winger, so I mean,
hopefully he can be converted into a wing back. We'll see.
well, hopefully we get the players to be able to play the formation which Heckingbottom wants, which I think we've changed a bit to go into a 4-back, but he just doesn't trust the current defensive recruits. Which, to be fair, neither would I, Paul. But yeah, we've gone. I know it's not safe with 26, 25-year-olds, bring them in from Scandinavia, because it is taking a bit of a chance because you get more bang for your buck. But my mates jeer me at this, and they probably jeer me again, but resale value on a player is massive, especially when you player trading. Bringing in a 26-year-old in Forderson's all good and great, and he's a good player, but is he going to, be able to resell for much? Mass, probably a bit of difference, because I think he's about 24, 25 now.
Right.
He has 2 years left on his deal. If a club comes in, let's say, the end of the year, you may be looking more like 6-7 million, which is a good return on a £1.2 million buy. But if you're buying, a 25-year-old winger who's for 1.7 million, say he has a good couple of seasons, a good season next season, he's 26.
Sure.
You're at that stage where Premier League clubs aren't going to look at him because he's above the age, and you're just hoping for a high-end Championship club to take him off our hands. But yeah, sorry for the long-winded answer, but Heckingbottom said player trading needs to come back, and hopefully the recruitment backs it up.
Brilliant stuff. Ollie, thanks so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate you joining us, and keep up the great work on the Better Buy podcast.
Thank you, Gab. Have a lovely evening. Take care, mate.
You too, mate. Cheers. Delighted to be joined now by Clive Whittingham from the excellent Loft for Words. Clive, thanks for waiting. We really appreciate your time this evening. Well, QPR 3-0. I had to rub my eyes just to make sure that I was looking at it correctly. 3-0 victory, and Ray and Collie very much the unexpected star of the show.
I know, yeah. We just got to keep May clear for the playoffs now, isn't it? Yeah, 3 goals in a game. Like, what is it? First home win in like 225 days. I think we were counting today. First time we've scored 3 goals in a game this season. So, just a massive relief.
I thought it was the first time you've scored 3 goals in a game since the Stan Bowles days, Clive.
Yeah, since Leeds last year, which I always love to drop into conversation when I can. But yeah, look, more relief than joy, to be honest. Strange game. Norwich didn't play the conditions very well, and having gone 1-0 down, basically all fell out with each other. They were sort of a strange watch, but they had 2 very marginal offside goals disallowed. They should have had a penalty second half. It's strange. I actually think we played a lot better at Watford last week and didn't win. Like, we had 5 clear-cut chances at Watford. And the story of our season has been when we don't play well, we just get beaten easily. And when we do play well, we end up with a draw. So it was nice to get one over the line, not quite accidentally, because we were the better team, but still, it was a strange watch.
Yeah, I did feel like individual errors of Norwich kind of helped you a little bit, and I think with Ray and Collie's just willing running kind of sort of fed into that. But he's seems to have was it something that you expected? That was he always this kind of really highly rated kid from the academy that fans felt like there were big things coming from, or was he a bit more of an unknown quantity?
Well, the people that watch the development team have been raving about him for 18 months, and it's been a strange situation where he played most of the preseason and started the first game against West Brom. He got caught out a little bit defensively in that game, but he did put a great assist in for the Lucas Anderson goal on the opening day of the season. And then he disappeared altogether, like not even on the bench and not even playing for the development squad, while the team was basically cratering, when both the strikers we had are either injured or in poor form. So there's been a lot of conjecture about, where's he gone? You do become a better player for QPR the longer you don't play for QPR. Everybody always thinks the answer is someone we've got out on loan or someone in the juniors, but it did seem sort of perverse that he wasn't even making the bench. There's a lot of talk about his contract. There's a lot of talk about sort of whether the chief exec and him have fallen out. His dad's quite active on social media. So there's been, if you create an information vacuum, sort of lots of stuff fills that gap that you don't necessarily want. So particularly for a 19-year-old kid, that's been unhelpful. He's come back onto the bench just lately, and they basically didn't have any other choice on Saturday. Sella got injured after 10 minutes. Alfie Lloyd's the only other striker on the bench. He's been out with a groin. It was a big ask for him to come and do 80 minutes. So they almost didn't have a choice on Saturday. And luckily for us, that's worked out brilliantly. I guess he's now going to have to start against Oxford on Wednesday, unless, Michi Frey's been out for months. I wouldn't think he'll come back in from the start. So he's probably going to have to play now because we don't have any other strikers.
Yeah, well, hopefully he can continue to step up to the mantle. At the other end of the pitch, Clive, there's I think teamwork is the key word here, because Jimmy Dunn, Steve Cook have got that real understanding with the rest of the defence at the moment, including Liam Morrison and Kenneth Powell. And I believe that the attacking midfielder Nikolai Madsen actually spent some time with Jimmy Dunn, when his dad sadly passed away this week. And so it shows there's a real community feel and a great culture that Matty Cifuentes has fostered.
Yeah, I mean, I thought to play like Jimmy Dunn did on Saturday with everything he'd had going on. I've had personal experience of that. I thought to go and play like that at both ends of the pitch with that going on in your head was just fantastic. Colley's obviously the sort of man of the match and the headline grabber and nearly got a hat-trick, but Dunn made a great challenge on signs, running through on goals, scored the first goal. I just thought he was terrific. Steve Cook's been a great signing all the way through. Liam Morrison is quietly unbeaten in 6 appearances this season, so him coming back has lessen the impact of Jake Clark-Salter's continued unavailability, because basically pre this, whenever Jake Clark-Salter didn't play, we didn't win. So Morrison's now quietly unbeaten in 6 starts, which I think says a lot. And Paul Nardi, although his command of the penalty area isn't brilliant, I think he's made a terrific start in goal. We've gone from no clean sheets in the first 14 games to 5 in 8, and we haven't conceded in 3, but coming back to our conversation in the summer, it's pragmatic Cifuentes versus idealistic Cifuentes. We've also gone back to what we did last season, which is just own the middle of the pitch, own the midfield, which was wide open at the start of the season. You've got good centre-backs and now a good goalkeeper. You can rely on that. Just dominate that middle of the pitch with a decent high press, concede the wings, rely on that defence. It's been a real turnaround in styles over the last 6 games. I think if you look, the last 3 games, we haven't conceded a goal, won at Cardiff, beat Norwich, and the most possession we had in any of those games was 37%, 37% against Watford, 37 against Norwich, and 32 against Cardiff. So it's very different to how we were playing at the start of the season, I think.
Yeah, it shows, again, he's had to sort of show that pragmatic side. But one thing that really stood out to me, Clive, is you had in midfield Jonathan Varane, and who I think is quite young, and also Morgan, who I believe was recruited initially for the B team. I certainly didn't have him on my radar as a kind of summer signing for the first team, if you like. So I'm wondering, I think Colback might be unavailable at the moment. So, his central midfield, maybe another sort of more experienced option in there. Is that something you might be looking to get in January?
I mean, who knows what their plans are for January, given how the summer transfer window is. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do Isaac Hayden on loan again, just to sort of firm up that central midfield area. But it has got better over the last few weeks. Varane has come up to speed with the division after a dodgy start. He had a few poor performances and a 3-match ban off a red card at Blackburn, which didn't help. So he's played well the last few weeks. Morgan's just, his legs and he runs about. It's just, he's a kid. And that's basically what we've prioritized, sort of athleticism and being good, solid defensively through midfield, rather than, maybe the more sort of hubristic, we're going to be brilliant this season style at the start of the season. They've sort of prioritized legs and running about almost in there. We do miss Colback. He is meant to be back sort of end of this week, or maybe Preston on the 21st. We've been, injuries have really hobbled us all season. We had the best availability in the Championship last year, which really helped us with the relegation battle. And this year, I think we must have had the worst. So,
right.
Yeah, but we're losing players as fast as we're gaining them. So we lost Seller at the weekend, and Powell went off at half time. It's not ideal, and you are having to rely on people like Morgan, who you perhaps otherwise wouldn't. But he stepped up, Collie stepped up, Lloyd stepped up when he's been required. It's needs must at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully Salah can be back at the loft soon. Clive, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this evening, and hopefully catch up with you later in the campaign.
Yeah, so you either have me on when we win or when we've lost 10 in a row. So I'm hoping it's the former. I'll see you when we win our next home game in another 200 days.
Sounds good. Cheers, mate. Delighted to be joined now. I want to speak to Christian from Hull and back in a moment, but we're joined now by Joe Bell from Argyle Life. Good evening, Joe. Thanks so much for joining us. I suppose the big news at Plymouth Argyle, in the absence of a game on Saturday, is that you've had a bit of a change around in the coaching scene in support of manager Wayne Rooney, and Mike Phelan, somebody he knows from his time at Manchester United, has come in as his assistant. And personally, I think that's a great move. Is that the same feeling among the Green Army?
Yeah, it's been when you have a game postponed, and the weekend's usually quiet, and there's not a huge amount that goes on. Gav, everyone just rolls into the next week. But the sort of murmurings began on Thursday that perhaps there was a change going to happen in the dugout, and word started to get round on social media that it was Pete Shuttleworth who'd left the football club, and eventually that was confirmed late on Sunday evening. And first and foremost, I think I think we should just pass on our best wishes to Pete. We understand Wayne said it's personal reasons, and hopefully it's nothing too serious, and that gets sorted out. Because one thing that struck me about Pete Shuttleworth is just how articulate and knowledgeable he is, not just of football but of sport in general. I've always been very impressed with the interviews he's given Argyle TV. So it's a shame he's left, and once the word was getting round that Shuttleworth was leaving the football club, I think there was only one name that everybody wanted, and it all goes back from when Wayne was first appointed in the summer. Mike Phelan did a radio interview where he said, if Wayne gave me a call, I'd be happy to have a chat with him, and everyone seemed to get very excited at the time that Mike Phelan was going to come in then. There aren't too many number twos up and down the country who've got a better CV than he's notched up in his time. Working alongside one of, if not the greatest top flight manager the country's ever had. And I think it's more of a long-term play that's going on here, Gab, because he's only until the end of the season. So yes, of course, he's going to be a great mentor to Wayne for the next few months. But there is a part of me that wonders whether he's been brought in also to improve the general coaching around the building.
Sure.
Just to pass on his knowledge and insight to Kevin Nanscoville, Simon Ireland, even the under-18s lads, Jamie Lowry and the team. They've embarked on a mammoth trip to Carlisle in the FA Youth Cup this week. So, hopefully Mike Phelan's influence around Home Park is going to be noticeable on the pitch. But I expect it will be very noticeable down at Harper's Park in training with the standard of coaching.
Yeah, you could only learn from somebody like that as a young coach, can't you? Somebody that's won everything at the top of the game as an assistant. So I think that's a great appointment, and hopefully that can be a springboard. In terms of the immediate challenge facing Wayne and Mike at the moment, how are you feeling about QPR's QPR? Plymouth Argyle's, get my football club right. How are you feeling about Plymouth Argyle's chance of beating the drop?
I was last on here, Gab, about 3 weeks ago, and we just come off the back of a really good point away at Derby, even if we didn't necessarily perform to our best in it. Since then, we've conceded 12 and we've scored 3 in just 3 games. The mood is low at the moment, I think it's safe to say. There was a lot of talk that the 2 games that we're in the middle of, obviously one was postponed, Oxford Swansea, that Wayne needed a certain number of points to keep his job, and Simon Hallett very quickly debunked that last Monday at a fans event all the way down in St Denis down in Cornwall, and he was very vociferous in his support for Wayne, and perhaps the appointment of Mike Phelan just backs that up. It's not just hyperbole and the dreaded vote of confidence, that they are actually, looking to support Wayne. I think that there's a lot being made of the away form, and look, I'm pretty clear that I think it's psychological. I think it actually does now genuinely need somebody with a medical background to come in and look at what's going on, because it has to be sports psychology. We know that coming to home park for teams is such a difficult thing because of the travel involved, and it's a long way, and then home park's just a really hostile place to be at times. There was a Gary Weaver, the Sky Sports commentator, whenever he talks about it, it's always rocking, and in adversity, that's when home park's at its best, when our backs are against the wall. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to be more competitive on the road. I mean, that last week we've just had, Norwich and Bristol City, Christ alive. I mean, it was just awful. Absolutely awful. And it was the same demons raising their head, Gab. As soon as the first goal went in, that was it. It was curtains. How on earth we got a goal at Norwich at 2-1? It's a lovely move from Cornell Such pressing high on the halfway line, and we get it through to Bundu, who finishes it well. But I mean, it genuinely, this isn't an exaggeration, it could have been 4-0 after 7 minutes. Like, it was dreadful at Norwich, and the pressure was going to be on Saturday. It will still be on tomorrow night. We the first goal is crucial, to use that huge cliche, but I do think that perhaps the Mike Phelan appointment has just lifted everyone's morale, certainly amongst the fan base. And as we touched on, if coaches can't learn off him, then let's just hope the players can pick up on some of his knowledge, because we just need that little gain at the moment. Because I think it was Clive there from QPR just talking about their injury list. Well, I see theirs and I raise you ours. We're still at the bare bones, and January's huge because everybody comes back in January, and then we're going to have to try and bring in some new faces.
I mean, I know Whittaker hasn't quite been at his absolute best form this season, but you put Whittaker and Sissoko back in the team, he's probably going to look a little bit better. So that definitely is one factor, isn't it?
Yeah, we've lost a lot of our attacking output without Ibrahim Sissoko being in the team. He's not necessarily the most bomb-proof when it comes to end product. But it is noticeable that when he's not there, our attacking output's non-existent at times. And yeah, the fact that Morgan's now out till January as well, that it could be that they both come back the same weekend and both fully fit, and who knows what happens. There is little murmurings coming around that maybe Sissoko will be back this side of Christmas, but I think that would be a very, very nice Christmas present. But I'm a little bit more cynical of that rumor than I am positive, should we say.
Joe, I like to argue with you about something, and I kind of want to challenge you a little bit on the argument that the away form is a psychological thing. I do understand where you're coming from, and I certainly think there's something in the Fortress Home Park thing and the atmosphere that you can create at home. But I also think there is a tactical component to this as well, because I look at the setup where you went to Elland Road, and I know Leeds away isn't a great example, because speaking to a Derby fan earlier, having the exact same conversation, so I know how hard it is. But you're going there with a 6-3-1, Joe. It's like literally a back six, and a 3 in midfield that don't get out their defensive third, and poor Ryan Hardy all on his own up top. Like, you've got to. I understand how big a challenge it is, but you've got to go there with some sort of plan of how to get up the pitch or how to occupy their defence or how to lay a glove on them. And I just kind of wonder, and given the sort of how passive some of the away performances have been that you've talked about at Norwich and at Bristol City, and I'm just wondering, is there a tactical component here in terms of, do you have a way where you actually, players can believe that they can go forward and create chances away from home?
Yeah, I certainly think there's something in that, Gab. I do. The more and more I think about it, the more and more it goes on. I just think Wayne probably overthought Leeds away. I think he probably put a little bit too much insight into the planning on just how good they were, rather than right. How, as you said about the Derby fan, how can we go there and disrupt them? How can we go there and put the crowd on the back foot, get them turning against their own team? In terms of Norwich and Bristol City, I definitely think we were set up all wrong at Norwich. I think that was just that was a hammering that was coming, and unfortunately, it came when there was 450 souls who'd braved a horrendous trip literally across the country. And then Bristol City, I think a lot of people sort of were drawn into the fact that it was 0-0 at half time. That this is an improvement. We're playing better. When actually, the fact it was 0-0 at halftime was just a plus for Dan Grimshaw at just how good a shot stopper he can be, because the only positive that came out of that performance was the fact actually Bristol City hadn't scored rather than anything we'd done. And I mentioned on one of the podcasts recently, we're just not getting enough touches in the opposition half, let alone the opposition box away from home. And I do think we are perhaps being set up, inept is probably the right word. I think we're being set up a little bit inept away from home. I'm strong on the psychological side of things, but equally, you can make it a complicated game when it isn't.
I think
And I
they go
do think,
hand in hand, Joe. I think you've got to have a solid plan, and that's what gives the players some confidence. So I don't think
yeah.
they're mutually exclusive.
Oh, we have a solid plan at home. There's absolutely, the plan at home's simple, really, and it's quite effective. Although the last couple of performances at home have been short of our best, I think that you can definitely attribute to the injury list. But away from home, football can be a simple game. You go there and you keep it tight for as long as you can, and a lot of the home teams will have a lot of the ball. You can concede that. But what you can't concede is the amount of chances you give them. Because, as you say, at Leeds, whilst, most teams are going to struggle to get more than 40% of the ball at Ellen Road, most teams are going to go to Leeds and they're actually going to be able to get something at the other end of the pitch. They're actually going to have the mentality that, right, when we get the ball, we're not just going to knock it about at the back and just make ourselves feel good. We're actually going to try and do something with it and try and get upfield. And I do think at times that's partly our problem, is that when we get possession away from home, all we want to do is just get a touch of the ball because we haven't had it for so long. So I do think I canvass that you should break it down into 15-minute periods away from home and just try and get through the 15 minutes without conceding and then try and get something. Whereas actually there's probably a case now that we should be trying to go away to grounds and just go all out to try and score in the first 15 minutes and see where it gets us. Because although we're taking these hammerings on the road, we're taking them because we're so passive and just sitting deep, and that isn't working. So the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and expect a different outcome, Gab. Well, maybe now it's time we do have a different outcome.
Yeah, well, hopefully that can come. Joe, just finally, because I do want to hear from Christian from Hull and back. Do you think Plymouth Argyle beat the drop this season?
Oh, Ollie mentioned from Preston that a lot's going to hinge on January, and it's huge for us because all these players are going to come back. The the cliche is that it's going to feel like new signings. I'm not sure how 34-year-old Joe Edwards can ever feel like a new signing, but he's going to give it a massive lift coming back into the group. And then hopefully the investor, fingers crossed. I mean, Simon Hallett says it's going to take the spending power to halfway in the division, which would be massive for us.
Yeah.
We aren't obviously going to be able to spend that all in January if it's done in time. If it's not done in time, contrary to a ridiculous news article that was put out this week. Simon Hallett said the shareholders will make money available to Wayne Rooney. So hopefully we'll be able to do some business, but I expect, again, similar to Preston's situation, it's going to be a lot of player trading. It may have to be squad player out, get somebody in, sort of thing. And there's bound, even though his form is dipped, there's bound to be stories around Morgan Whittaker. So I
I
don't
mean, cashing in
expect,
might not be the worst idea.
potentially not, Gab. We rubbished it in the summer, but maybe that might be the way we're going to have to go to get
Yeah.
a bit more depth into the
You're
squad.
probably not
But
getting 20 million this time, but it would certainly raise the money for.
maybe not. And I expect for us lads on the podcast, January is going to be a very busy month. We're going to have a lot to talk about, ins, outs, and results.
Yeah, plenty to discuss. So more questions than answers.
Certainly is at the moment.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, love your stuff on Argyle Life. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us, Joe. And I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Cheers, Gab. Keep up the good work, mate.
Top man. Cheers, Joe. So delighted to be joined by my final guest, which is Christian from Hull and back. Good evening, Christian.
Hey.
Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, evening, mate.
And thanks for waiting.
Sorry, mate.
Just wondering, the appointment of Ruben Selles at Hull City has lifted spirits a little bit, I imagine. But gosh, quite quickly by going to bottom of the league with that 1-0 defeat at home to Blackburn.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Ruben coming in. I mean, and Walter going out. I mean, everybody was praying for it without sounding extremely harsh. Tim lost a lot of the fan base as well, and it was just really difficult for a manager to not only get the support behind him to stay in the club, but I believe the players felt that to him as well, and I believe it was a lot harder for the players to get behind him. So I mean, the replacement of getting Ruben Selles in was, well, to be honest with you, getting Ruben in is probably the best manager that we could have got in and who's needed, especially the conversations and the media and generally what you read on any sort of social platform of kind of Ruben's style, really. Especially from Reading's former captain, was it Joby Akinov? Yeah, I remember reading something from him saying, like, with the circumstances that it was under, I mean, let's not hide it here, Reading had it bad. Point deductions, late on salaries, all that transfer embargo. It was just messy. And Ruben, with his off-field work and getting that kind of bringing the groups together, the team together, was huge for Reading. And it was obvious this season as well, so far, with how Reading were playing, and you could see that spirit was lifted again from all the previous seasons. And that's where Hull are at the moment. We need Ruben to kind of get our players and the fans out of that slump.
Yeah.
And to bring us all back together. So the appointment-wise of bringing Ruben in, personally, I think is perfect. I really do. I just hope Ajahn and kind of his brain team assist him and give him the time to kind of get things right, because without sounding overly harsh for the love of the club I have, we're in a bit of a dire mess at the moment. I mean, it's been a bit messy. Well, it's been very messy since the beginning of the season. But at the stage we're at now, it's very, very obvious where a lot of the issues are lying, especially with players that we have or don't have, and the injuries we've had and still have, and some of the key players that we've lost as well, especially on our wings. It's painful to kind of look at us and go, oh dear. And without a win, in 11 games? No win in 11 games, and only 3 home wins of the whole of 2024.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody I don't know if you're anyone that's watching this right now can see it on my face, the anguish, but it's bad, guys, for us. And it's nothing for the one of really the kind of the trying. I mean, this season alone, 22 players out, 16 in, full new coaching staff out, new coaches in.
It was all late in the summer. It wasn't like you had everything
All
lined
late.
up when you returned to pre-season as well.
Yeah, it was literally last day, and it was a complete utter mess and a worry for us throughout the full beginning of the transfer market. At the beginning of the season, we were all worried, all of us. And Ajin, I'm not going to blame Ajin in a way. He has held his hands up and said, "I fumbled the ball a bit." But
Well, that's good.
Ajin,
Do you know what? I would appreciate that if I was a Hull fan. I think that an owner
Yeah.
can take some accountability. I think I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, of course, and it was nice for, like you say, as a fan, it's nice to finally hear him say, "Look, I fumbled the ball a bit." I mean, he obviously had his targets in mind that he wanted, and some were a lot bigger than the others, and there was a lot of people going after these targets, and obviously they went elsewhere. So we went to target number 2, but target 2 went elsewhere, then target 3 went elsewhere, and in the end, it was like, I didn't plan this far. Right, get whoever we can to fill these gaps, and unfortunately, get whoever we can to fill these gaps just isn't paying off. And I guess with Ruben now, his big job is not only identifying his best 11, but what the fans see as their best 11 as well, because it's all over the place, especially in certain positions on the pitch. You've got some players that will give you 110%, but then their quality might not be as good as somebody else's.
So like a Slater, a Louis Coyle, and Alfie Jones kind of type we talk.
Louis Coyle definitely is in that bracket. He is 100 and he wears his heart on his sleeve, 150% effort. You can see how much he tries.
Yeah.
He loves the club. But say this game at the weekend against Blackburn, his legs, the pace has gone.
Right.
He couldn't keep up with the game. Well, tactically he could, but one-on-one against a very pacey winger and strikers, he was left in the dirt. And those type of issues, which are slowly creeping into the club, especially after you've purchased like 16 new players as well, it is a worry. And obviously every Hull City fan is now looking at January and how January is going to be. I mean, we've got loans, which we're all saying just send them all back.
So which of the loans then, remind me, Christian?
So the loans, we've got Bedia up top at the moment.
Do you know, I don't mind Bedia. I think he's a bit of a handful. He's quite strong, isn't he? He's mobile.
He's definitely can hold the ball up. But we'll use again this weekend as an example where he actually got the ball to his feet. He had a bit of space, and all he had to do was whack it with his right foot. And it was just afraid to whack it. He was afraid to even just look at the ball. He actually put his head up and tried to find somebody else when he was the only guy up the pitch playing a 3 up top system. He's definitely tried, but we just don't have any strikers at all, really. I mean that's obvious by the amount of goals and losses we've got. Because if you've got strikers that are scoring goals, you're winning games.
Yeah,
and we're not scoring goals.
Isn't that mad though, Christian? Like, given the amount of money that you've spent under Ilijala and the number of players that you've brought in, and yet you still don't have a decent permanent striker.
Yeah,
like,
it's crazy.
If I think of the permanent strikers that you brought in under Aj and Ilijala, and you can help me, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was just João Pedro for this summer. And then last season, it was an area that was completely neglected because Liam Lapp got his loan recalled and you were playing with false nines most of it. I think it was similar the season before. Like, how can you spend the amount of money that you've spent under Ilijala over the last 3 or 4 years and bring in the number of players you have and not really invest in the number 9 position?
Yeah, and this is it. And this is where it gets really tricky for us as well as fans, because I don't know if you've heard the term of flying around from Ajin and Hull City, his brain team, when it comes to signings. So apparently Ajin and his brain team generally are the only ones who actually look at the signings, and they're the ones that suggest the signings instead of the manager. Okay. Which that means obviously a manager's coming in, and I mean, yes, he can identify a position that he needs, but if he's not the one kind of doing any suggestions for his kind of own style and only just saying, well, this is my style, go find me someone that way, it's really hard to bridge that gap of a manager's style over to somebody else trying to find it for
Well,
you.
well, I don't think, Christian, from my perspective, I don't think that's a bad thing in and of itself if the quality of the recruitment is really strong and there's an alignment between the recruitment and the style of play the management wants. I think that the difficult part of the situation you're describing there is you had a manager in Tim Volter who was very stubborn in building up with a kind of narrow back four and all of them involved, and it's really hard work to progress the ball up the pitch, but it's very disciplined and regimented that way. And then all of a sudden you're bringing in a pressing coach in Ruben Selles who likes to press with a front three. It's quick transitions. It's accelerating the ball quickly. Pretty different to how Tim Walter would want to play. And that's an in-season change. So how do you change style sort of in season? And that's going to take a bit of time. So then all the recruitment preparation that may have or may not have been done for the style that Tim Walter wanted, that kind of goes out the window and it's looking like another massive rebuild. So for me, the principle of not people outside the management team taking responsibility for the recruitment, I actually don't think is the worst thing if they're qualified and if there's an alignment. But I think maybe possibly both things are in question here at Hull City at the moment.
And I agree. And that's, I mean, let's go back to last season's January transfer market. What signings we had. I mean, Fabio as well was obviously the big name that came in, and he came with a lot of criticism to begin with, not from the Hull City side. It was just generally down to how well he's done at other clubs and demeanour. Yeah. But yet, we all knew he was a quality player. Everybody knew he was a quality player, and it proved it whilst he was at Hull. The Lap, like you've brought him up. Yeah, okay, he's been around a few clubs. He was classed as an okay player. And then now look at him. You know, the headlines are everywhere. Big moves. He's scoring the goals, well, as much as he can with what he's around at the moment. And this season for us is going to have to be January. It has to be January. And I say luckily enough because of the injuries, because it's awful of the injuries that we've lost with Balumi and Miller, which are the two biggest losses we've got. If I could pick any two players not to be injured throughout the full season, it would have been them two players. And to lose them both within weeks of each other with an ACL, it's awful. And now we've just got to look at January. That's all we can do. Ruben's going to have to obviously do as much as he can with the players he's got. Yeah. But I don't still see where the goals are going to come from for Hull. Defensively and midfield players, I believe we've still got a quality team. And Casey Palmer on weekend, with him being left out so much by Tim, and then the game he played at weekend, by being managed by Andy Dawson, obviously at the moment still classed as the caretaker he was, even though Ruben was at the ground. Casey Palmer was playing attacking midfield. He had more shots than anyone on the pitch. He touched the ball, I believe, more than anybody else on the pitch, and did more runs than anybody else on the pitch. So this is our little thing where we're seeing players that weren't used under Tim correctly, and all of a sudden they're just like totally new players. Ryan Giles, I'm the biggest critic of Ryan Giles.
Sorry, Christian, just on Casey Palmer, is his work rate improving now then, do you think?
When you give him the ball, to be fair, he's everywhere. He's everywhere.
Really?
To receive the ball.
Really surprises me because I've seen Casey Palmer previously in his career in more recent years, and I've found him to be a little bit languid. And instinctively, I would have thought he might struggle in a Ruben Sellers system that's so much about engagement against the ball, but he's given himself a bit more of a chance.
I think it's more his positional sense than anything. Off the ball has been a lot better to receive a pass, and then when he's got the ball, he's not just get rid of it. He's actually attacked the back line or attacked the midfield and carried the ball up the pitch, which was lacking. It's always.
Is he going to fit into a 4-3-3 then, do you think, Christian? Because I think that's how Sellers is going to want to play. He likes to press with a 3. So if you're going to give someone a free number 10 role, I think that could leave you quite open. So I'm just curious.
I'll be honest, I'd bang him up top because we've got no striker options at the moment. I'd bang him as the main striker. I really would. He's had more attempts, and I think he's still joint top goal scorer at the
Are
moment.
you going to
as
look
well,
into
if I'm
free
honest.
agents then for strikers then?
We're going to have to look everywhere. We're looking everywhere at the moment. It is that bad. Up the top three at the moment is that bad. I don't see where the goals are coming from. This is my perspective, and I believe a lot of fans will agree. They just don't see where they're coming from. I thought Pedro himself as well, when he was playing up top, he tries, but his legs are gone. Age is caught up. You know, you can see that he was once a really good player. It's just,
Can Omer play up top?
no.
Okay.
Omar, I'm really happy Ruben's here because I want to see Omar kind of come out of his shell a bit more this season. I think being played on the wings wasn't good enough for him, and it was almost like a one-man army when he was in central midfield, well, the attacking central midfield area. However, his frame doesn't give him the strength to hold up the ball very well.
Right.
So if you've
he's a very slight footballer, isn't he? I was thinking
he is
a bit like a Ozan Tufan kind of false nine type.
Who I really wish we had at the club right now. I mean, I understand why he went home, and I don't think it's actually going very well for him at the moment in Turkey, by the sounds of things. That I've been reading in the papers. But the one thing that I'm happy about as well today, I would say, is with respect for Ruben, that he's got his technical team in today. So he has got Oliver Pearce and Tobias Loveland. They arrived today, so his first team and his assistant. So that's going to obviously kind of help project Ruben's style out and communicate it a lot better in the short space that we've got with the game coming up on Wednesday. Now, I'm not expecting mental changes at all, but with the 4-3-3 that obviously Ruben likes, with the players that we've got at Hull at the moment, do I believe it's the right call? No. I understand why Ruben wants to do that, because that's what he's comfortable with, that's what's worked for him. But with the current squad that he's got at Hull, mainly because of injuries, I will say this, mainly because of the injuries, I don't think we're solid enough for a 4-3-3 right now.
Right.
I would say 3 at the back and 3-4-3 would be potentially a lot better for Hull right now.
Okay.
For instance, like I mentioned Louis Coyle earlier, with his kind of pace. Yeah, his pace is gone, but he's still the guy at the back kind of also cleaning up.
Well,
So
would you have him on the right for back three then?
Drama.
So
the back. Sorry, right at the back. Sorry, the right at the back three. I would actually have Coyle. I would have Coyle.
Okay, that makes
I'd have it as Hughes, Jones, and Coyle as my back.
Yeah, I like Charlie Hughes actually. I think he's a very talented defender.
Brilliant. He's brilliant. Obviously still new to the league, being Championship, obviously. He's brought over that strength and grit that you need from the lower leagues. You know, that fighting press. His passing ability has surprised me quite a lot, actually. His vision to find a good switch ball. I wasn't expecting as much from him, but they've been the cleanest ones so far. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's picked up a few yellow cards and he's already had one game out because of his type of challenges. But as what Hull City fan doesn't like those type of challenges, I guess. And especially with how we were getting counter-attacked under Tim, I think it was inevitable that he had to give away a couple of those professional fouls to actually protect the scoreline from getting any worse, let's say, than it already was. They're the danger zones with us. I do believe Ruben has a huge task. Yeah. I believe I'm in no illusion, and I'm beginning to feel Ruben straight away after watching the game against Blackburn has realised how huge the task is. And hearing some of his interviews, again, the same. I believe
The good news is, though, Christian, you're not cut adrift because there's 5 points separating the bottom 9, so that's
There
up
is.
to I think 16th. So 5 points off 16th. So
Yeah.
things can change quickly if you string a few results together.
But then again, your first game in charge is Watford. I mean, Watford are a quality team. They always have been a good team, but there's no doubt in that.
You've got to try and solidify there to try and get something, even if it's just a point.
I would love a clean sheet.
Yeah.
I truly, not to concede a goal is the best feeling right now a Hull fan could hope for. Just not concede.
Do you know what it is, though, Christian? I think even in the best case scenario, which is Hull beat the drop this season, it does feel very much back to square one, doesn't it? Where you made, when Ilajala first came in, I think that was in season. The first summer was under shot of Arveladze, made a lot of mistakes, took Rosinia a while to iron out some of those mistakes, and then by his second or third season, you were kind of in the playoff conversation. But it feels like because of the mistakes that were made in the summer, it's like you've completely undone sort of 18 months, I think it is, of really good work from Rosinia, and it's like right back to square. It's like a game of snakes and ladders.
It is,
right?
It was inevitable, though.
16 players, and I can't imagine. I don't know how many of them are out of contract, but they were at least going to be 2 or 3 year contracts, weren't they? So you're going to be stuck with them for another season at least, aren't you?
That's the thing. I mean, it was always going to happen this season, mainly because of with Liam in charge. I'm not blaming this on Liam Paddy in any way. Sure, I still love Liam to this day.
Yeah.
But he had a ton of loans. We were just a team of loans, and it got us 7th. And obviously, they're only temporary players, are loan players. So once they're gone, what have you got? You've got to rebuild. And the players that he already had signed from the previous tertiary of like Schulte and everybody, their contracts were running up. And then those standout players like Greaves, who had an absolutely immense season last season, now gone to Ipswich. And credit to him, he had a great season. He deserves to be playing in that league. And in a few seasons' time, I still say that Greaves would potentially go higher and higher. But that's the kind of truth that we were living in as Hull fans. We were going to lose a team and we were going to have to rebuild, mainly because of how structured it was from the beginning of the regime of Ajan, unfortunately. And even if we kept Liam in charge, we would be in the same boat with the team. I do feel the cohesion of the players would have been a bit better. And I feel that some of the players that that have left would have potentially stayed. Not all of them, just a few key ones. And I think we would have been, obviously we would have been a lot better off, but it wasn't to be. We got rid of Rosinia. We had to do a full rebuild. The gamble hasn't worked. The transfer gambles haven't worked. The lastminute.coms haven't worked. And now we're going to have to, unfortunately, Ruben has a job in his hand, but he's the manager that we're all looking to now with what everyone's saying about him, how his off-field issues has proven that he can keep a group together, bring that kind of solidarity back to the club, his professionalism, how he's done, I mean, what he did with Reading already with like the circumstances. We're a club in that kind of, not as bad as obviously Reading were, but we're still on the scale of where things are bad. We're still in that zone. And if Ruben's done it once, I guess we're all looking at him. Can you do it again, please, sir? Because we need you badly to do that. Now, are we going to stay up? Skin of our teeth. Last game of season. That's where I think we're going to get to. Unless a rabbit is pulled out of that hat during January, it's going to be skin of our teeth. And I do believe things will come together, because what I saw on weekend, though we lost, was so much nicer to watch. it was nice football for 45 minutes anyway, other than the own goal. But for 45 minutes of that game, it was a nice game of football to watch, which we haven't had this season at all. And that was under Andy Dawson. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to Ruben putting his stamp on there, let's call it.
The one source of hope for Hull City right now. Christian, thanks so much for taking the time to join us this evening on
Cheers,
Hull
Gabby.
and Back. A bit of an extended chat on the Tigers. Thanks to all my guests this evening. Thanks to you for watching at home. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can do us a massive favour by heading over to YouTube if you're not already on there and hitting that subscribe button for EFL Debate and doing the same for Spotify. Cheers, Christian. Cheers, everyone. And we'll see you again next week.
Pleasure. Cheers, everyone.